I don't think it would really change things because we're going to pick each one up and go, how do the corners look? Are there any spine stress lines? How does it look around the staples? What's the page quality? So we would still grade one the same way we would all the other ones. I don't think it would be a thing where, okay, this guy's sending 20, we got to give him at least 3. But we're not trying to get thousands of 9.9 pre-screen submissions in. I'm looking at it more like a service that people have just been asking for, kind of like signature authentication.
Hey guys, before we get into the show, we need to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsors. First up, Ultra Pro. Ultra Pro has the best protective materials for your card, gaming, or even comic book collecting needs. Here in their shop, they have all sorts of goodies like top loaders, bags and boards, and even UV protected holders. And the best part is, if you head over to their online store, ultrapro.com, and use my promo code SWAGGLE, which you'll see in the description, you'll be able to save 5% off on your next order. Again, that is ultrapro.com. Use promo code SWAGGLE to save 5%. This episode of Swagglecast is also sponsored by me. Yes, that's right, Swagglehoss. Did you guys know I wrote a comic? It's called Sanity: Rise of the Occult, a Lovecraftian pulp adventure that pays homage to the detective style of comics from the Golden Age. Start improving your comic collection today by picking up a copy at swagglehosscomics.com. Again, that's swagglehosscomics.com. Pick up a book and also consider grabbing some of that sweet Swagglehoss or Sanity merch. All these little purchases and your support help me keep the channel going and bring you guys the best possible content I can. Thank you all so much for watching. And now, with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. All right, well, I am joined by President of CGC, Matt Nelson. Matt, thanks so much for hopping on the channel today. It's good to see you.
Oh, thanks, Mickey. You too. Yeah, pleasure being on. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've probably been very, very busy. It feels like it's always busy at CGC, especially in the wake of, sort of your recent press release announcement, the partnership with JSA. I thought we could kind of, get right into it and start there. I'm curious, like, how did this whole thing come about, with JSA? Has this been something that was, in the works for a long time, some kind of like partnership, or is this like something that just kind of happened really quick, like because of certain circumstances? Can you talk about where this came about and how it came to be today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was a gradual thing. It wasn't sudden. I've been talking to James Spence III. They call him J3. I had met him at a show a few years ago, and we were having a discussion about, partnering somehow to authenticate autographs. And obviously, we knew that, signatures. And we had, we'd always recognized that was a valuable service for collectors, because obviously there's a lot of signatures that are not witnessed through the Signature Series program. And so with all those books floating around there with qualified labels or downgrades, that, a service like JSA's would be very valuable to get those into, very pretty holders, get higher grades, whatever the case is, authenticate the signatures and show that they're actually real. So we had been talking just really over the years, and finally the talks broadened to include not just a partnering, but actually, acquiring a company, which we did. And so, it was years in the coming, really, but I think the demand was increasing more and more because obviously Signature Series program is huge, a huge part of CGC, and getting bigger, and which pretty much signatures in general are getting a much bigger thing over the past 24 years with the growth of shows and all the creators and celebrities coming out to those shows and signing things. And so the pool of books being signed is just growing over time. And obviously the ones that are not witnessed are growing over time. So it was just like this demand that was just growing and growing. And of course, we just felt that it made great sense to bring JSA on board and to obviously open up that service and have all those books finally authenticated and have those signatures
right
on the label.
Right. I'm curious about that, like with the demand side and people talking about it. Has this been something that, like, do you get people at shows that have like pestered you like the last like 10 years just saying like, hey, like, why can't you guys authenticate it? Clearly this is a Stan Lee signature. Like, is it something that you guys have felt? Like, from my position, I always sort of thought that you guys were just kind of had an ethic thing where you guys were like, hey, we didn't see it, it doesn't count, and that was just like the way it was going to be. But was that something that existed because you guys just had no other system to verify stuff, and then this came along? Or was it like, okay, we just hear the community and we're going to react to what the community wants?
Actually, what the community wants. I mean, and people have been asking me for years about this. And yeah, it's disheartening whenever you go to a show and you get a book signed, and then you turn around and you're like, oh, 6 series or CGC, and then it's too late, even by minutes, and so all that frustration, that people were feeling, and various other scenarios. But yeah, people would come to me, and a lot of people at CGC that were interacting with customers were hearing this as well. So it's becoming more and more apparent that it was easy to just have the 6 series program and just move forward with that, not worry about getting into the authentication space. But I think it was clear that the demand was there, and it was growing, and the desire for us to do that was growing. And it made sense because we're the leader in comic book certification, and so it made sense to offer authentication as well, because so many people wanted to have their books and CGC holders now with that new label.
Right. I'm curious how you guys landed on the label being gold and black. I had a lot of, people discussing it in my social circles, and I speculated on my channel talking about, oh, is it going to be something where do they have to make the label orange in order for it to be a very, very clear distinction? And then it's sort of like, but then it's going to be weird if you have all these different colors, and then people are going to, not like that the aesthetics don't match and stuff. I'm curious, like, how you guys landed on this, and if you could share some of those discussions, and thinking about, like, okay, how does the secondary market, how is it going to react to these things? Like, do we have to consider how the secondary market operates in this way? I'm curious if you have thoughts on this and how you arrived at the black and gold.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was not even part of the label design. It was kind of a surprise to me, or a surprise for me, I guess you could say. Usually I'm involved with label designs like the pedigree label, but this particular one, JSA, this acquisition was really huge, involved a lot of moving parts, a lot of people over a span of time. And so, I was dealing with the stuff over here, which was mainly like the different iterations that we're going to see come to the grading room. All the different combinations. What if you have signature series signatures and unwitnessed signatures? What if you have signatures obviously that are proven to be not authentic, or grade being a factor, and then of course you have to factor in books that have restoration on them or conservation, other qualifiers like Mary covers. And so we had to come up with all these rules. So I was mostly involved in that part, and then it came down to the label, and the team had been working on it very hard. And so one of the meetings we had, they unveiled it, and when it popped up on my screen, I'm like, wow, that's gorgeous. And they were like, we're hoping you were saying that. And so it kind of was sprung on me like that. But I think, if I had to guess, I think the gold or yellow label, I guess it's similar to the 6 series label. It's got the black strip on top that with the CGC JSA logo. And so I think it's similar to 6 series. But yeah, I think to your point, we've got so many colors that you got to be careful about what you choose, because the colors that are left over are not the most ideal, like brown, orange, things like that. So you don't want to differentiate too much from the existing product. So I think because JSA is so closely related to 6 series, it made sense to have a label similar to it. But it's obviously very sleek, and it's going to trump 6 series for books that have signatures that were both unverified or unwitnessed and witnessed. And so that had to be a consideration as well, is that we wanted collectors to be happy with a 6 series book that ends up in a JSA label for those reasons. And I think we achieved that because the label's gorgeous, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, because I wondered if that was at all like a worry for you guys, because you have such this robust, signature series program, right? Where a lot of artists come in, they do signings, and it's really a large part, at least from my experience, of going to the con and running up and getting the witness, even if it is a little bit taxing to have to get someone to come with you to go witness it. But it's a part of kind of that culture. And I'm curious if you guys had worry of, what this does for the, say, witness program in general. Like, is it going to be too easy now for me to, get someone else to do it or sign it over here and not have to go through the proper channels? And, a lot of people I think out there, from the collector side, I hear people talking about how, like, oh, well, the witness one is so much better, like as far as, what the value should be on the secondary market. I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. Whatever happens is going to happen. But I'm curious if you guys had to have those discussions at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think there was ever a worry that it was going to, take the place of 6 Series or overshadow it, or draw business away from it. I'm sure there's going to be some people who say, "Oh, it's just easier for me to get it signed myself and send it in through JSA," and you get the label. But I think there's also extra value with 6 Series in that, it's witnessed. It's 1,000% witnessed. Not saying that JSA authentication is not 100%, but there's I think some comfort people have in that. And you also have the date it was signed. And in some cases, people are actually present when it's getting signed, so they get to actually see it happen. I think that part of that experience is, part of the drive or the motivation to use 6 Series. So I look at JSA as being more like a complementary to 6 Series, to, as we talked about, catching the ones in the past that missed 6 Series witnessing, or even obviously the ones from way back, especially the ones prior to 2000 or 2002 when the program launched. That the tons of books that have the such cool signatures from all the greats like Kirby and Ditko and all the golden age artists that signed Schuster and Siegel and so on and so forth. So that, to me, I think that's where the real value of JSA is going to show itself. And then if people have books in their collections that happen to have that Grello label where they there was one thing on the book that got missed, they could use it for that. But yeah, I really think that I don't really see it adversely affecting this Signature Series program.
I'm curious if you guys are aware of some of those chattering conversations that happen, around everything that you guys do, whether it's JSA or like, hey, we're going to launch this new thing in our business, or hey, we're going to do graded pulps now, or whatever. Like, do you guys sort of hear the conversation, be it positive or negative? And do you guys ever use that into your own sort of judgments on where you guys want to go forward?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We watch all of that closely, the social media, the message boards. We go to shows.
Hopefully you don't watch my videos. I apologize for everything that I said. I don't remember what I said, but I apologize. I'm just kidding.
That's the first thing I do when I get an invite. I go in and no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, no, I actually, we do watch now. We probably don't watch all of them, but if something is relevant, if there's a relevant topic or a hot topic, we certainly like to go and see what the public's reaction is, good or bad. And and I think Ask CGC is one of those things where we've more and more tried to improve our communication and transparency with our customers and collectors in general, really, through that back and forth with them, getting information from them, seeing what they feel about how they feel about things. And but yeah, the social media, I mean, it's it's not always positive. I mean, I've learned over the past few years, I've watched how CGC is definitely on the hot seat, and everything we do is watched, and even one little thing can cause a fervor, and so it's been fascinating, at times disheartening. I'll admit that I'm a little taken aback sometimes by the responses, but I'm sure all of us at this stage have seen how the social media chatter it's the things that people say sometimes are just mind-blowing. So you have to kind of grow a thick skin reading that stuff, because it was definitely not the case like 20, 25 years ago when CGC launched. We didn't have, it was a completely different landscape. We had the freedom to make mistakes early on, take the time to fix them. People were more patient, understanding. The community that we were dealing with was smaller at the time. There were people that we knew, especially when we launched, because they helped us launch. The dealers, a lot of the collectors were very close with us. And but over time, obviously, we've grown. The hobby's grown. People's expectations have grown. The world has just become a much faster place, and everything is put under a microscope. So it's definitely a different world we're living in now. And so we have to pay very close attention to all the feedback, positive and negative, across the board, because even though a lot of it may be noise, there's a lot of important information that may help us make decisions or pivot, or whatever we need to do. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is about the community and us servicing the community. So it's very important to listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, I think that that's a really, really good approach, and it's interesting. You know, I'm very glad that you guys have decided to do some of these things like the Ask CGC segment. And while I certainly will, excitedly scroll through the comments just to see what people are saying, even when it gets to like the deep dark side, once you scroll past a few sections, I think it's really important because I'd rather live in a CGC world where you guys are sort of just sharing like, hey, here's our perspective of how we do things. And if that opens yourselves up to critique, then so be it. At least we understand where you guys are coming from. And that was even sort of my thought when I myself on my channel did a reaction to the video where you guys were talking about 9.9's and Matt was talking about it. And I certainly had some of my own critiques, at least from what I saw with the process. But at the end of it, my takeaway was that I'm just really happy that we're seeing this. And I hope that CGC continues to do stuff like that, even if it does if it invites, criticism along the way. I mean, hopefully you guys are okay to hear that, because I think ultimately it's best for everybody in the community. Kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
I do. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to talk about the 9.9 thing.
Oh, yeah, well, that was going to be my transition for us. Is like, speaking of, open yourself up to it. It's from one interview, the last time I think that you were on a YouTube channel, shout out to Dave and Manu, when they had you made mention of 9.9's on that, and that became a thing. And then, the video that came out with Matt, talking about 9.9, certainly that opened up a lot of conversation. And I guess, I'm curious to ask you about that as far as, 9.9's are concerned now today, like, where are you guys with that as a company? Has this been a conversation or a topic, or did you ever suspect that your sort of passive comment about a 9.9 pre-screen would open up the can of worms that it did? What's your sort of thought on this?
Yeah, no idea. I had no idea. It's not the first time it's happened, and but it was funny because it came up completely out of the blue in the interview. And I, obviously 9.9 newsstands, it's right there in his name. And I forgot exactly how it came up, but it was an idea that we've been kicking around for a while. It's obviously something that customers have been asking for a long time, because we have a 9.8 pre-screen down. And one of the questions that I always get in interviews is, what's the difference between 9.8 and 9.9 and 10.0 for that matter? So, there's a curiosity there. There's a demand there, obviously. People would love 9.9's because of what they bring. And so from all that, the idea was, what if we just opened up a 9.9 pre-screen? And that was it. It was really just an idea, and discussing it at the office, me and a couple of guys, and that was it. And so I just kind of put it out there because it came up. I thought it was interesting to just kind of float the idea, having no idea the conversation it was going to cause. But it was great because it was along the lines of what we're talking about. It's a chance for us to be able to vet an idea with the community before we do it, which I think is super valuable because it gives a lot of intel on what to expect, whether we should do it or not, how we should do it. And it's where we're at now. We're the funny thing is that out of all of those, all that talk that went on after that comment was made, I started to get people coming up to me saying, well, where's the 9.9 pre-screen on the OSF form? Where do I choose this on the online form? Or how's that going? And I'm like, we're not doing it. We never were doing it. Like it was like a telephone game where, it turned into an idea, into an actual thing that was happening. And so I find that very amusing. But yeah, as of right now, we're just kind of sitting and waiting. We're not doing anything with it right now, and still kind of gauging the response. I think what I feel is that from the people that are concerned about it, it's primarily because of the fear that the census is going to pile up with 9.9's, which is ultimately going to devalue 9.8's or in 9.9's for that matter. And no, my answer to that is that I guess there's two groups really that I'm looking at when it comes to this pre-screen service, and it's the older books, like the pre-2000 books, your Copper Age, your Bronze Age, and then you have your new books, like Ultra Moderns. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to Silver Age and back, there's practically no 9.9's out there. I mean, if you took an early a book from 1963 or 64, and you brought all the 9.8's back in under one roof, and you went through every single one of them, most of the time you wouldn't find a single one. I think this is more a conversation about copper and to a lesser degree bronze, where you have a much higher number of surviving copies because collecting had really taken hold by that point. You had speculation of people saving books, keeping them in nice shape and all that. But that being said, I still don't think there's going to be there wouldn't be a lot of 9.9's coming out of that period. Not to the degree that I think people would be concerned about. So just in my own experience, having graded books before CGC and after CGC, even with pressing, there are certain books that have a higher chance of getting a 9.9 versus others. So like, for instance, like a Wolverine Limited Series 1 versus a Spidey 300. Spidey 300 is a black cover. Wolverine #1 limited tends to be, those turn up in higher grade a little bit more often. And if you look at the census, you probably see the percentage of 9.9's and 10's that have come out on Wolverine 1 compared to Spidey 300. If you do the percentage comparisons of 9.8, it's probably much lower on the Spidey 300. In fact, I think we've only a handful of Spidey 300s and 9.9. I don't think we've ever done one in 10. So, I really wouldn't foresee, even if we open this up, I don't see, I envision going something like this. First of all, one of the hurdles for us is the bandwidth. The time it would take to screen books for 9.9, and then inevitably a lot of those would probably need more work, not a lot of work, like pressing, like little tiny, working like little tiny corners out or a little dry cleaning or something like that. But everything would become minutia. The screen would be minutia, the pressing would be minutia, the grading, and then people would in turn, they'd have to screen their books. So somebody had 100 9.8's, and they sat there at home and they went through every single one. They picked out the best 20, and they sent those to us. And then we had to go through those 20, and out of that we might find 0, we might find 1, maybe 2 candidates, and then we go through the process of regrading those, and maybe you get 1, maybe you get 0. I mean, that's how I see it happening with bronze and copper. And like I said, there might be some books that you would find more 9.9's on than others. But on the ultra modern side, it's a different story. And obviously those books are new, freshly printed. If the paper quality, the printing quality is good, there's a much higher chance of that. And we already give 9.9's and 10's out. Every week we're giving out a good number of those on new releases. And so that world really wouldn't change. In fact, that becomes more of the 9.9 pre-screen becomes more of just a help for submitters that commonly submit moderns to us. We have guys that will submit a lot of the same book through us each month, and they're always looking for 9.9's and 10's, and they get them sometimes. So in that case, the service would be more about just helping them hone it down and get be a little bit more exact about what they can expect to get. But at the end of the day, I feel like they're still going to get, probably the same number they're already getting, because it's not like, there's, not much more you can do to these books. And when they come in, like Sean's video, that he showed screening that pile of books for 9.9, 9.8, 9.9, and 10. I mean, that's a common practice he's been doing for many, many years. And, it really boils down to just printing defects mainly on those books. And so it is what it is. It's not like you can manufacture more 9.9's. He gets the pile, he does his thing, and whatever comes out of it comes out of it. So, that world, the ultra modern world, I don't think would really change much with the 9.9 pre-screen. It would just make, just provide that extra grade up that people are already looking for anyway. So, so that's my thoughts. So
yeah,
we are not offering the service right now.
yeah. This is all hypothetical right now. So yeah. I can understand, the ultra modern stuff. I mean, I've always kind of said on my channel, whether this is right or wrong, it just is sort of like, I mean, we live in a world now where it literally goes from the printer sealed to CGC. So like, it sort of does beg the question, like, why wouldn't there be, 9.9's and 10's in there? Unlike, say, Copper Age books didn't necessarily go literally from printer to CGC. But I will throw this out to you. I'm curious to hear you talk about this, because I suspect that there's a lot of people out there where the concern comes for the 9.9's and adding stuff to the census when we're talking Copper Age and to lesser extent Bronze Age, is sort of in watching that video, my reaction was that it feels like there is a little bit of comparative grading kind of going on when you have like so many of the same copy of a book. And I can kind of understand it actually a little bit, because I wrote my own comic book and I did all the fulfillment, and going through 1,000 copies of it, looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, there actually is better books compared to each other.
Mhm.
But I guess I imagine that there's going to be people out there that, will take, yeah, I'll buy, 20 New Mutants 98s that are all 9.8s, and I'll crack them all out. And like relative to one or the other, maybe I can get that 9.9 in there because of the perception of the books compared to each other. And I guess I'm curious if that is something that you guys have to consider, or is that like an element to your guys' grading when you're looking at stuff? Is comparative grading a part of it? Or should it be a part of it? And I'm curious what you think about that side of it.
So just so I understand, comparative grading, you mean like grading books normally in the grading room versus looking at them coming in through a 9.9 pre-screen where they're specifically looking for that? Is that what you mean?
I guess I think of it as like, the saying, not all grades are made the same, right? Where it's like you can have two 9.8s and one is like, but look at the colors on this one compared to like the colors on this one, right? And
Oh,
this is like a better 9.8. So if
got
I'm
it.
somebody who sends in 10 of the same book,
I see.
and there are some in there that say are more saturated just compared to the other one, or the printing is a little bit better, like that one may walk away with the 9.9 compared to the other one that's the 9.8, and so I'm making up this term comparative grading, but that almost feels like what kind of comes out of that,
Yeah.
like a 10 book submission. What do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, all right. So like your example of New Mutants 98. So if somebody sent us 29.8s, I guess comparative grading would be like what Sean's video is doing, where he's comparing all the books compared to each other.
Right.
And yeah, and Sean's comparative grading, I'll make this point real quick. The modern books, we've noticed, and we've probably talked about this ad nauseum over the years, how the printing process has changed so much over the past even 10 or 15 years. It continues to change, and it changes from company to company. Some have very high quality, some don't, obviously, because print costs and print media and all that in general. Everybody's trying to cut corners these days. And so what happens is that in the grading room, we create sometimes a grading curve for certain books that have a printing defect that's present on, say, all the copies or almost all the copies. Enough to a point where it's just not going to, we can't, reasonably give everything 9.4s or 9.2s or whatever, 9.6s. 9.8's usually the top. So if there's like a Marvel with the ink rub, that's a real common one from past several years, and so there was certain issues of that would have a light ink rub, and we would say, all right, 9.8. But but to get 9.9 or 10, it had to have no ink rub. So in those cases, those books they just didn't exist, or maybe a couple would get through. So as far as the New Mutants goes, so if we turn it around to that, I guess if we were doing this in when that book came out, 35 years ago, and we had a big pile of New Mutants 98s in front of us, the same thought process would go into it, comparative grading. But in reality, those 20 copies have circulated and come back to us 35 years later. And so I think at that point, it would still boil down to the defects on the book. Ink strike, particularly on modern books, is less of a factor because usually they're all well preserved, and the grading differences were not that drastic by the 80s or 90s as they were, say, in the 40s or 50s. And so it really comes down to what's left on the book, which would be defects or in some cases printing defects. New Mutants 98. Trying to think if it really doesn't have any print, like a Hulk 181 with that ink smear or something.
Right. Does the wrap come into play, say, when going from a 10.0? Like a 10.0 has to have a perfect wrap. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, it does. I know there was discussion, the giant size one that came up. I know some people were talking about how that one didn't have a perfectly squared, like the spine line was moved a little bit off center.
Yeah.
But there, I think in that case, and I'm jumping around here a little bit, but the giant size, the square bounds, the way that they're made, it's so hard to find, even sometimes 9.8s, let alone 9.9, because the spines are smashed. Forget centering. You've got, and then you got like the little pulls in the bottom, the paper pulls from the printing. And so, every giant size one that we see has got something, there's like a little tiny bindery tear, or the spine squished, or And so that particular copy came in, and it was just perfectly square. The spine was square, the corners were square, and yes, it did have the wrap was off slightly, but it wasn't a 10. But the book was just spectacular. And I think that's probably the comparative grading that comes in to play, is that even if we had 20 New Mutants 98s in front of us, really a grader is doing comparative grading all the time for every book, particularly vintage books, because we've got a mental database or a memory bank of all the AF-15s we've ever seen, all the Hulk 181s we've ever seen, all the action ones we've ever seen. And so when a copy comes in, this is part of being an expert grader, is that you've got to be able to recall that and mentally compare that copy in front of you to all the ones you've seen before. So I don't have to have 20 action ones or even 20 New Mutants 98s in front of me, because I've seen dozens of action ones and obviously thousands of New Mutants. So having 20 of them in front of us, I don't think it would really change things, because we're going to pick each one up and go, how do the corners look? Are there any spine stress lines? How does it look around the staples? What's the page quality? Centering, obviously. So we would still grade one the same way we would all the other ones. I don't think it would be a thing where, okay, this guy's sending 20, we got to give him at least 3. It's definitely not going to be that. And I think that's why, there's going to be a lot of, fails if this service ever became a thing.
Right.
And the fee would have to be substantially higher because of obviously the time we're spending doing it, which in turn is going to, make for a pretty large bill if you send in 20 books and you get 1 or 0, and then you get stuck with a bill that's several $100. It's a bit of a deterrent, and so there'd be a bit of a learning curve, I think, involved with the collector understanding what we're looking for, which, that's always been the case. But, they would have to go out looking for, they would have to go find 9.8s in holders that look like, wow, it's like all these things are missing on this book. Maybe if I fix this little thing or that thing, could get there. And I think it's more about going out and finding these books in the wild, because, I do believe that, after all these years, you look at all these 9.8s we've graded of all these books, particularly ones that we've graded hundreds of 9.8s of or more. And, I believe that there's 9.9's and there's, in those books, and maybe they weren't pressed, or maybe they weren't fully pressed, or whatever the case is. So, I think it's more of just kind of like, all right, you got this thing open, now go out in the wild and go see if you can track down, the handful of books that could possibly achieve this grade, and pull them out and, and expose them, for what they are. So that's how I see it in my head. I don't think it's going to be a thing where a guy sitting at home or a girl and sends us, his 100 slabs and gets, X back every time. It's
right.
We're not trying to feed the beast here. We're not trying to, make this a profitable service for, we obviously want to make money, but we're not trying to get thousands of 9.9, pre-screen submissions in. I think I'm looking at it more like a service that people have just been asking for, kind of like, signature authentication. There's people that like, it'd be great if you had a 9.9 pre-screen. It's like, yeah, sure, great. And then I mention it to the world, and it explodes.
A lot of people will throw out the statement of grading is subjective. The analogy I always use is that in baseball, there's a strike zone, and umpires have sort of subjective biases of what they consider strikes or balls. Is that similar? Is that fair to say that that's what CGC has, as far as like you guys have a strike zone, but maybe each grader sort of has their own tendencies and subjective lens in which they see books?
Absolutely. Yeah. They have, and that's why it's important to have the team grading together to round off those edges, because if you just have this person or that person, looking at an AF-15, it's not, they're not going to go too far off the reservation, because obviously we've, the guys looking at that book are, world-class grading experts, but the truth is that, yes, it is subjective. But there is a strike zone, and there are times where, often that, let's say 4 of us look at a book and we're all at the same grade, and there's no argument. And then, other times, 1 or 2 of us are off, but usually it's not off more, up 1 or down 1. Usually it's one direction or the other. Usually it's between 2 grades. And it's really amazes me, because because of its subjectivity, and because of the, infinite combinations of defects, particularly with mid and low grade books and older books. The ability for a group of people to get together and arrive at a grade, independently, the same grade, or at least within 2 grades, over and over again every day it's kind of shocking when you think about it, because how does this happen when you could show that book to people on the street, 2 copies, and you would get two wildly different answers. How did we get here? And it really is just a simple matter of having standards in place and doing it over and over and over again for all these years, and it really works. It actually, you really develop a sense, even with the subjectivity factored in, you develop a sense where sometimes the grade just jumps out at you, or you get there pretty quickly. And that's from looking at, so many copies of, AF15, FF1, all these books, even the newer books that come through. And so there's a strike zone where, we, sometimes a book, and it's easier too sometimes with particular defects. I can't give all the credit to the graders. Sometimes a book is very easy to grade because it has one particular defect that's easily quantifiable and defined. Like, for instance, a high grade book with a subscription crease with the front cover that breaks color. I mean, that's generally a 5.5. A split spine on a book's a 1.8. If they tape it, it's a 1.5. So books like that are just easy. They're just really, you still have to count the pages and check for restoration, all that. But some of them are just no-brainers, and you can fly right through it. And then obviously there are books that, there are times where we are very much in disagreement over the grade of a book, and we have to stop and have a discussion about it. But those tend to be more books that have anomalies on them, or maybe they have a lot of restoration or some other weird things going on that maybe we don't see that often, and so we don't have that mental database of this particular defect to be able to recall and go, it's this grade,
right?
It's but there's the subjectivity is certainly always going to be there, because at the end of the day, we're looking at so many different books with so many different defects, and we do the best we can to get it right.
Right.
As the saying goes, give it the highest grade possible without being wrong.
Right. Speaking of that, can you help? Let's dispel the myth right here, right now. Everyone always talks about 9.8's cannot have spine ticks. I've even heard that in some rare instances, I think maybe if I'm misquoting you, forgive me, I feel like I've heard you say that a 9.9 could have a spine tick. Mm-hmm. Is this within the subjectivity of how the spine tick exists within relation to the book, where it is on the book, how it compares to the colors of the book? Can you talk about, let's talk about that specific example, the one spine tick and the grade.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is discussed in the grading guide. And, the grading guide is really just it's a foundation that provides tools to learn how to grade, but ultimately people have to go out and grade books to build that experience. But in the back of the book, there's the Hulk 181 that's broken down from 10.0 down to 0.5, or actually no grade. And it goes into what's allowable in each of those grade categories in terms of defects. Now, obviously, the number of defects expands as the grades go down, but there are a few. I think there's a few listed 9.8, probably several, and then that number gets smaller for 9.9 and 10. But they're there. But they're exclusive of each other in that grade range. And so, you'll read it and say, well, 9.9 can have this or this or this or this or this, but they have to be exclusive. They cannot all exist on that book at the same time. So that's one point. The other point is, its location. It's like the stress line, the size of it, does it break color, and how the rest of the book looks. So less of an issue on modern, because that takes factors out like page quality, fading, gloss, ink reflectivity, the staples. There's all these aging issues and handling issues that are not usually a factor in newer comics. So it really comes down to printing defects and whatever handling where there might be that's present. So now printing defects are usually one of the main things that keeps a book out of a 9.9 or a 10. But when it comes to handling defects, a stress line is going to be the most common defect that's going to bring a book down. But it has to be an either or. You can't have a book with a printing defect and a stress line get, a 9.9 or a 10. Usually it's one or the other. And it depends on what the printing defect is as well. Some defects are severe enough to bring it down even further, right? 6.94 or even lower. But assuming the book is completely free of any defect, anything else wrong with it, it's perfect in every way. 9.9 can have one little stress line that breaks color, very, very tiny. And a 9.8, I believe 9.8 can have two. And obviously 10 can't have any.
Right.
So, but then, we get into minutia here, because you can hold a comic book up in the light And this is one of the problems in a holder, is that you don't have a chance to hold it, first off. And then the second thing is that obviously looking at it through 2 layers of plastic, so you can't, but tilting the book in the light is really important because it shows a lot of defects that you can't see otherwise face on. And so there are times where you can hold a book up and look at the spine, like a high grade book, and you'll see like little tiny, I'll call them stress lines, but they're just more like little indentions, maybe just where the book slightly curled, and they cause a couple little bends, but they don't break color, and they're pretty much imperceptible. So we actually, would allow a little bit of that going on in a 9.9 as well. And so, again, we're getting into the nuances, the subtleties of, what is allowed in that 9.9 range. And truthfully, when you're talking about spine stress lines, I could break that down into, many different groups. It really boils down to what's in front of us at that time,
Right.
and the wow factor. You get the book in front of you and you're like, wow, this book is spectacular, but it's got this one little thing. But wow, could we see this in a 9.9? I mean, really, we're asking ourselves that question, like the giant size one. I mean, we're comparing it to all the other copies we saw, and we're like, this copy is stunning. It's literally the best copy we've ever seen. And another thing is, you say the ones that pop. We oftentimes will see, particularly in Silver Age, Golden Age as well. Those, you pull an X-Men 1. Or Avengers 1, like the Marvel keys especially, or really any books from that era, but the keys especially, the ink reflectivity is a big one, because those who have seen enough copies, like Avengers 1, they have varying degrees of red that kind of look more reddish or more orangish, the green, the deepness of that green on Loki, and then every once in a while we'll come across a copy where it's just like blindingly. The colors are so vibrant that it almost looks better than when it was printed. Because we just don't see them that often look like that. And so in those situations, aesthetically, those books to me are superior, at least in appearance, than, other copies around it. But then you get into, the other defects, and inevitably it ends up getting the grade that it gets. But to my point, it's just that there are certainly books, certainly on the vintage side, that do stand out, that have that wow factor, that just blow our socks off when we pull it out and see it for the first time. So that's definitely a thing.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I think that's something that everyone has sort of had that experience with. Like, anytime, it's one thing to come across a book that, say, has been on a dealer's wall for a certain amount of time, and then it's another thing to come across a book that's like, oh, this has been in a box in a basement for 30 years, and you can just tell, like, the colors, like literally no sunlight has been on this for 3 decades, and it makes a difference for sure. I'm curious, like with the grading guide, you guys put it out, I think it's been about 1.5 years now. What's it been, as you sort of reflect on it? It was a big, obviously, project. It was a big thing to kind of put out there. Like, how has sort of the feedback been? Are you guys thinking like, oh, you'll do like updated editions and stuff? Because I imagine things sort of evolve. And how did you even land where it was? Because, as far as I understand, you became president in 2021, joined the company with CCS. CGC existed before you. So at some point there was a grading standard that kind of existed even before you worked there. And so it's almost like a little bit of an evolution. Like, talk to me a little bit about the book and how, you look back on it now, since it's been out there for about 1.5 years.
Yeah. So it was not really an idea until I got there. And well, no, actually, I was talking to Steve Borak about it. No, not Steve. It was Jim Halpern. That's what it was. It was many years ago, like, I don't know, 2007 or something. And he said, you should write a grading guide. You should get with Steve and write a grading guide, because at the time Steve was with CGC. And I'm like, that's not a bad idea, because actually I was working on the pedigree book, which still hadn't come out. But and people still tease me about that. But we're working on that. It's that will come out eventually. And so I thought, well, that's not a bad idea, because Jim had written a grading guide for coins, which I think was one of the foundational books for coin grading at the time. But he had written the book before certification in coins started. So it kind of went, it came out in a different order. And I think coin grading, or at least certification, was a lot of it was based on what was in that book. So the idea was there, and it was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. And then years later, I joined the company, And sometime in 2014, I think it was, the idea really took hold of my mind because I realized a couple of things. One, that there was a need for it in the marketplace because I noticed that we were growing. CGC was obviously growing. There was a lot more new collectors entering the space that didn't have the same experience that collectors did back, say, in the 90s, who were used to handling books and grading their own books and checking for restoration and having to do all those steps themselves. CGC obviously was allowing or taking that step out of it for people, making it easier to sell their books and because they're already graded. But what it took away from was people's, or at least in some people's, or some collectors that came into the space, they just made the decision, well, I don't need to learn how to grade because CGC is here doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But then they get their CGC books or they get them graded or they buy them and they're like, well, how do they arrive at this grade? And then, so there was like this need for people to learn, how
I feel that all the time, Matt. I feel that all the time.
Yeah. And so I felt that there was a growing desire for that, but I mean, not to the point where somebody's like, you need to write a book. It just became kind of an idea in my head that the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, this is really, this is a good idea because, for a lot of reasons, it's not just educating the public. It's also, really showing the world that there are standards that exist in the grading room, and here they are, and really an exercise in just for myself and really for the grading room as well, is to kind of get it all down on paper to such a degree, in such depth and in detail that there were things we were coming up with in our discussions while we were laying this out among the graders that we'd never even encountered before. Things like with staples, like moving staples around, repositioning staples in SAC. I forgot what it was, but there was a few things that we came up with rules for that we still haven't seen, and so it was a great exercise for that as well. And so it just kind of helped coalesce everything, so the grading room's got the standards that are in the book. Obviously now it goes much deeper than that. They had been in the room for a while before the book was published. But it's what's in the book, but there's additional information, such as we have, charts and graphs. We've got like on the, missing piece section, we've got a chart where it's like, the size of the piece, the grade otherwise, and then, the grades that would be assigned in each of those cases across the chart. And, it's a guide, obviously, you use that as a starting point when you have a book in front of you, but you still have to factor in the other defects and the attributes and the qualities of the book to arrive at an accurate grade. But that was certainly there in the grading room. And then obviously when the book came out, it was, very well received. I mean, I didn't, it's dense, I kind of laugh about, you actually read the whole thing. I can't believe you got through all of it. It's a lot of information. But yeah, I think we've sold out or almost sold out of the print run. And it was slow and steady. Obviously sold a bunch up front, and it's just been kind of trickling out since then over the past 18 months. But it appears to, I think Mike Greenwood on the boards, who's a moderator, he had told me the other day that people reference it often when they're having discussions about grading on the message board. So that was good to hear. I like to hear that. And obviously, people talk to me about it when I see them at shows, and I recommend it to anybody that doesn't have one, particularly at the shows when new collectors are coming in. That's another great reason to have it on hand. Somebody that was at C2E2 recently, I was there at the booth, and they had a massive collection, and they were just getting into, they bought it many, many years ago, and they had left the space, and now they're coming back in. Obviously, everything's changed, and they're starting from ground zero here. So I'm like, well, I told them I could tell them in that time, and then I said, here's a copy of the book. Take this and then read this. And so, that helps people get off the ground and running much, much quicker than having to sit at home and sort through all the stuff available online or not available to try and figure all this out themselves. And of course, future editions, we are certainly going to update the book as we go. I mean, heck, even in the past 18 months, things have changed that we need to update. Obviously the JSA thing being one of them. And so that's, there's going to be, I don't have a time frame, but at some point I'll go back in there and adjust some things, maybe add a chapter, add some paragraphs. And at some point we'll probably end up, maybe laying the book out again, differently, redo the cover. I don't know, something. But there we'll probably we may run one more print run. Because it's only been 18 months. I think there's still, demand out there for the, people that don't have a copy yet, and we're almost out. But past that, I think I would guess there probably is going to be another version that comes out. With all this things that have transpired since then, that should be in there.
Yeah, I imagine that it's something that you'll always need to keep up with, say, the arms race of all those crafty scientists, pressers, and cleaners that are always kind of coming up with new techniques and new ways to improve book quality. I'm curious to ask you about that, and maybe we can focus on one thing that, at least in my social circles, I feel like has been more of a trending thing. Like, we all know pressing and cleaning and stuff with dry erase and all this, but one of the big things that I feel like has kind of exploded is cover whitening. And I've seen lots of YouTube videos of people being like, I did this thing and I got the purple label. And I've seen other people do cover whitening and they got the blue label. I'm curious if you could talk about that. Maybe you don't have to go into like the specifics of like techniques, but is it something that you guys, when you look at techniques, do you start from a place of like, well, what does the community accept? Or do you guys have additive stuff is just resto and, what do you call it? Anything that you remove is okay. If you can remove it, that's subtractive stuff is okay. Like, how do you guys kind of bridge these sort of new techniques and what kind of conversations happen in the building?
Yeah, so that was a very sudden thing, because I think it just kind of exploded. I don't know what, a year and a half, 2 years ago, where all of a sudden we started seeing these books coming in, and it's like in pressing, like, intent is not really a factor in grading. We can only grade the book that's in front of us. So with pressing, over the years, there was a lot of discussion about, in the beginning, during the legitimization of it. First it was, should it be disclosed on the label? What's being done to it? Is it safe? There was all these conversations going on about that. And, at the end of the day, it was like, well, we can't tell if a book's been pressed 100% of the time. And we can't obviously tell the intent behind it. All we can do is just look at the book and say, well, how does it look? If pressing got it back to its original state, and not a different state, or it didn't cause any side effects, and the book looks kind of like it did, if it was unpressed, well, then that would be fine. Or, even if it was pressed nicely, obviously now today we've got, everybody's gotten really good at, some people have gotten really good at pressing, so, we still see some train wrecks in the grading room, but, pressing, I think, has evolved to a point now over the past 20 years where, there's an understanding, there's an expectation for everybody, for people that use that service or press, or us grading it, or books and CGC holders that were pressed. There's an expectation level that's developed over that. So with the cleaning thing, we're kind of back in the beginning of that, that same scenario where it's different, but we're kind of treating it the same way, where we don't know, we can only tell what's in front of us. And so like pressing, we're looking at things that, side effects that have occurred from this process, cleaning or whitening, bleaching, whatever it's called, whatever people want to call it. I think, but bleaching was always such a dirty term in comics, and yet I think scientifically the term is light bleaching, right? And so, so I'm hesitant to use the word, but the whitening, we'll just call it, is, to what degree has the book been whitened? How does the cover compare to the interior, the side effects? And so we're looking at those things because it's the same thing with pressing. How natural does the book look and feel? Is the book still in the realm of its originality? Does it still look, it doesn't look fake, doesn't look too white, doesn't look washed out, doesn't look faded, and then there's other issues that are more about the grade, such as change in dimensional change, like shrinkage or expansion of the cover, stains that have been introduced, any warping or ripples that have been put into the book, obviously structural damage to the spine from manipulation, those factor into the grade itself. But as far as the conserved grade or the purple grade versus the blue grade, it really comes down to, like we always have with clean covers from day one, which is, does it look unnatural? Does it look too white compared to the interior? One of the ways that we tell a traditionally clean cover if it's cleaned, among other things, is the whiteness, which is that's the first thing that leaps out at you. Is you open up like a Golden Age book that has dark pages and the cover's stark white. Now that does exist in the wild sometimes, but there's other factors involved with cover clean that you kind of piece that together with the whiteness, and you're like, okay, this is clean. And so that's the same mindset that we're approaching with this new technique of cleaning, but we're still looking at the same exact way. How does the cover look compared to the interior? How does it look in general compared to other copies of the same book? And so that's really the line of demarcation between a blue label and a conserved or purple label.
It's funny. Is it kind of come down to eventually what the community itself wants and settles on? Because this was before my time, but even with pressing, as far as I understand it, there was a time when, like you said, most people were like, this is so not allowed. And then it just sort of became, yeah, like obviously you should do it. And I wonder if there's like a world where cover whitening, that's so not allowed. But then 20 years from now, everyone's like, well, my books kind of look better when it's cover white. Let's just be okay with it. Like, is it sort of a conversation with the community, or is it more like what you said, where it's like, we just want to know that how it was on the shelf, the closest version to that? What do you think about that?
I mean, we have to take a stance, immediately, when these books start coming in. That's true for anything that has happened in the past or comes down the pike in the future. So, it's that decision's made then and there, but absolutely, we'll always listen to the community and look at trends and see where it goes. We're always open to changing our stance on things. I think, again, there's a split opinion on this, because you've got, the purists who look at this as being, a form of manipulation that's making the book look fake. It's kind of like the pressing thing in the beginning, right. Where, this is being done for money. This is being done for, it's unnatural. It's unsafe. It's what are the long-term effects and all that. And those are all good conversations to have. So, we're certainly, I'm actually talking with, I've been talking with a few people in the science community about, this process and going deeper than what we're just seeing in front of us in the grading room. So there's certainly, this is a path that we're on that hasn't, we haven't finished this road that we're on, this
conversation.
Journey. Well, yeah, this conversation.
Yeah.
And it's possible because it's happened in coins. I don't remember the exact time frames, but coin cleaning was, I think, became a big thing in the 60s or 70s. And coin collecting went through a period where everything was getting cleaned. All the toning was being washed out because people wanted silver, bright, white coins. And then it changed and went back, and all of a sudden toning was more preferred. And then coins that were clean were getting hit for being cleaned. And then people came up with techniques on how to reintroduce toning into coins. And so, if you apply that to this situation, maybe you've got something where people fall in love with, white comics that are whiter. And then down the road, someone wants them to go back to having a nice aged look to them. And someone else will come up with a technique to make them darker again. I don't know. Yeah. Anything's possible, I guess. But, we're certainly, we just want to make sure that we're walking a fine line between, what we feel is right for the book and for the grade, the representation. Right. When we certify that and we put our stamp of approval on it, we want to make sure that we're comfortable with what we're seeing, and in terms of the safety of the book, how it looks, how natural it looks, and things like that. So
right.
But we'll certainly keep on this conversation open and see where it goes.
I am curious with as far as the cracking and pressing stuff going on. Obviously, it's become a huge thing in the hobby. Tons of people cracking out books, and I'm curious how that sort of relates to, say, the CGC census, and if you guys have had conversations about this. I have to imagine that there's a lot of instances where 9.6's might be severely inflated in a lot of ways, because 9.6 is the perfect book of like, hey, maybe I can crack this out and I can get a 9.8, but if whether I do or I don't, I'm changing the 9.6 number in some sort of way. And I'm curious if you guys have had any sort of discussions about, what to do with the labels or old labels or books that are in theory no longer on the market. Is that something you guys have had conversations of, or is there, maybe a future trade-in program where you get all these crackers and pressers to, donate their labels for, I don't know, $5 off their next grading submission? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, CGC actually had that in place when they first opened. The first, I don't know, a few years, they actually gave, I think it was like $3 for every label that was returned,
Oh,
and there was that incentive program. But I think that was baked in because there probably was a fear that had come from, say, again, we're going back to the coins and probably sports cards too. At that point, there were instances where certain coins or cards, the census had been affected because the labels had gotten lost or destroyed or whatever the case was. And so I think they knew going into this for CGC when it was open that that was going to be something they really, really wanted to work hard to keep accurate. There's a story about a coin collector who had cracked out all these huge coins and had all the labels saved, and then like his someone in his family like accidentally pitched them all, and they were all destroyed, and he was distraught because they're still in the census. But that's an interesting anecdote. But I think one of the good things is that after all these years, the vast majority of books are in CGC holders. So we're not dealing. I think that the real trouble starts or could potentially start when you have competing grading companies, particularly early on. So coins in particular always had, they've always been two competing companies for the space. And so you get a lot of cross grading going on, a lot of crackouts and cross grading. So that's something that we really haven't seen nearly as much of as coins has. We've seen some of it, particularly in obviously the past few years, but not much. And so I think that's one reason why the census is preserved. Another thing is that, at least the first number of years, the crackouts that were occurring were pretty small because pressing had not really gotten going yet. I don't think it really gained a good head of steam until 2009 or 10 or 11, and like really gaining steam. And then 6 series, which is the other reason people crack books out. So and that was 02, and that again was gaining steam over those early years as well. So those first 10 years, you really didn't see a lot of that happening. And now, obviously, you've got more people cracking books out for those reasons. But there's really nothing we can, besides offering an incentive program, which is a good idea if it was a concern of ours. We really just have to trust that the people that are doing this want to keep the census accurate. I mean, I think it's in everybody's best interest because more books in the census is only going to adversely affect values.
Yeah.
Particularly for the rare books where there's only a handful at the top end. And so, I'd like to think that people, and I think for the most part they do. I mean, we get, we have people that'll send us bags of labels that they'll just throw on the side and build up over time. And we certainly, take those off. And so, my gut feeling is telling me, based on my experience in buying and selling these books, pressing them, having them graded before CGC, and then of course since CGC, that I look at the numbers in the census, and my gut feeling tells me it's largely accurate, and when you get into books like Spidey 300, where there's how many 9.8's are there? There's probably 1,000, 2,000.
Yeah, a few thousand for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if 50 of them, 50 labels went missing, it's not going to change anything. Different story when you're talking about. I'd say probably the danger zone is going to be like your high grade, early bronze and silver, probably gold to some degree, where you've got just enough on the census to be where there's they're floating around there, and people are they might crack them for whatever reason, to press them or whatever, and 1 or 2 going missing, or 3 could be 20-30% of what's up there, and so that could swing the numbers, but on the other hand, typically those books that's in the stratosphere of collecting in terms of value. And so you're dealing with a much smaller people who own them, who press them, who are buying and selling them. And so those people are pretty cognizant of these things. And so I think they're in the hands of responsible individuals that are not going to be careless with those labels and get them back in.
All right. Well, I will say, to all you presser and cracker people out there, send your labels into CGC.
Yes.
Let them get rid of them, and hopefully, Matt, you guys can reward those people. Give them I don't know, a pin for their effort or something.
If you tell you what, if someone, I'll offer this right now without, if somebody sends us 100 or more labels, I'll give them let's say $100 grading credit. How about that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say 500 and 500. We won't go, but I'll have to discuss that with the team. But yeah, if you send us 100 more labels, I'll give you $100 grading credit. So,
wow, look at that, like a recycle program. There you go, guys.
Yeah, now
you heard it here first.
Right. Now don't take your 800 labels and send me 8 groups of 100. Please don't do that. Just send me labels.
While supplies last.
Yeah, let's just say that maybe let's say that's that offer is contingent.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if somebody wants to drop a bunch of labels off, I got, we'll discuss the credit.
Yeah. Well, I know you're busy. I got a last couple little things I'd love to get your thoughts on before I let you go here. Switching a little bit of gears from, the Census, back to kind of, I think this is really more in the modern space of collecting. One of the things that I've seen, at least from covering stuff in the community and some of the sentiment and maybe some of the critiques I've heard for CGC, is in the current modern retail market, there's been some people that have said that they don't like that you guys are involved in, say, helping retailers create exclusives or create scarcity, or if Swagglecast wants to make his own comic book cover, I send you guys 3,000 copies and then you guys destroy 2,800, and now I have this rare limited to 200 comic book thing. I'm curious if you guys can talk about that thought process and maybe just sort of where you guys ride the line in sort of exploring, these kind of new business ventures, while also sort of trying to, what I assume is to be kind of just sort of a neutral, hey, we're just sort of here to grade your collectible. We're not trying to help you produce collectibles. Like, how do you guys sort of have those conversations, and where do you guys, see the line between sort of new ventures and working with retailers in that sort of way?
Yeah, well, we've done business obviously with retailers for many, many years. In fact, the thing that we do that you're talking about is we've actually done that for many years as well with retailers and publishers. And it's really, we're just, at the end of the day, we're just grading the books. But if a retailer has or a publisher, let's say, puts out an issue and they have a particular variant of that issue that they want to have exclusively CGC graded, then, as you said, they'll do a print run and send us 1,000 copies, because, as I understand it, like a lot of times these the printers will only do a minimum of 1,000 on a particular issue or a particular type of issue or variant, and so that's usually where the 1,000 number comes from, and so those are shipped. We keep tight controls on this process, but those are shipped directly from the printer, not the publisher, but the printer, to us. And then we pick out, if they want 200, and let's say they want 9.8 or better. And so we'll go through those 1,000 until we hit that 200 number. And then we stop and destroy the other 800. And we destroy them ourselves, and we keep record of that destruction. And then those 200 are labeled 1 of 200, 2 of 200, 3 of 200, 4 of 200. And then those are shipped back to the publisher. So that's the process. And then the publisher, I guess, sells them. The way I look at it is that the alternative, which happens with the other variants, I guess, is that the publisher sells those, or they're distributed to, through Diamond or whoever, and they end up in the collector's hands, and then they submit them to CGC and they get them graded. So essentially, the end result is the same. It's just, instead of happening piecemeal over weeks and months, it's happening all at once. And I think store exclusives are another situation where we offer the same kind of thing. So we're not really involved in the book itself, or certainly not the sale of the book. We're just doing what we normally do, which is just grade them. And so that's kind of the framework of it. So I personally don't. We've been doing it for a while. I don't really see anything, any issue with it, but I don't know. What do you think would be like the concern?
Yeah, if I could sort of, as far as I understand it, what the critique would be is you have say a retailer who comes out and says like, oh, there's only 100 of this book, and that's going to adjust the value as it does, right? Because people think it's limited to 100, when in reality it's like they printed 1,000, and so it's this manufactured sort of scarcity. And I guess you guys sort of being involved in it or helping them destroy it is kind of like, well, you're sort of a little bit in the weeds with them on this stuff. And a lot of people, I think what a lot of people have issue with is they want people to know that like, hey, there's no book that just gets 100 copies printed out there. Like, you kind of have to understand, like, somewhere out there in the trash bins at CGC or the recycle bins, I should say, like whatever that happens to the books, like there's other copies out there. So you have to be mindful of this. And I guess it's really just a matter of like how CGC wants to operate with it. Cause I could see you guys taking a stance of, hey, we're not going to hold your remaining 900 copies. You're going to send them back. And if you want to, not sell the 900, that's up to you. Versus like you guys helping them grade a small sliver of it. It's really just like how you guys decide to operate in this space. And I think that some people have had issues with it. I mean, it's very inside baseball. I think a lot of people who care about this stuff, it's probably a small fraction of the community, but those are sort of their complaints, as far as I understand them.
Interesting. So I guess, assuming that they're all getting destroyed, which, we take great, care to do that. I don't think we've had a situation where like another 200 popped up after the fact. Right. But that aside, I kind of look at it like if you compared another variant in the run, like a one of 300 or something like that, and if you did the math, and let's say that the print, with the print run and the copies per issue or the variant per number of copies that is thrown in with to the retailers. You end up with, let's say, another variant that actually has 200 that exist when you do the math. And so the difference, though, is that those 200 go through the channels of the distributors to the retailers, and they put their orders in. And this guy gets 3 copies, and that guy gets 1, and that guy gets 5. And then those are, whatever happens to those are sold. Those are ultimately slabbed, most likely because of their value. And so the end result is that you have the same thing. You've got, at the very end of the day, you've got 200. Those 200 are in holders, right. And, obviously, the grade is the grade, I guess. But, so basically, I guess to your point, or what you're saying, is that that's all happening up front. Like basically it's, those 200 ending up in holders before they even hit the public. The only issue I could see with that is if, not giving the collector the chance or the retailer the chance to make that money, and the publisher's making that money instead, possibly. But again, that's I don't know, we've been doing it for many years, and I never really noticed it as being an issue, but maybe I've just missed that on social media or something. But it seems, when I think it through in my head, it seems like it's it's happening. It's just happening up front rather than on the back end. But I don't know. I see your point, though.
Yeah. I don't know how much of an issue it really is. I mean, unless you're really kind of in the the niche of people that really, really care about this stuff, and to them it does matter. And so curious to hear your thoughts on it. And like you said, I mean, I feel like whether you guys do it or don't do it, it's gonna happen, right? Like some retailer is going to break it down to, say, 100 copies anyway. I think that the point is that more copies get printed out there, and where they end up, nobody really knows. And maybe somebody has a magical warehouse where all the limited exclusives are.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the issue is where the money, and this is really a conversation with STIG series facilitators and all these things. It's like, where do you fall in these steps? You as a consumer, you as a dealer or a retailer, you as a facilitator, as a publisher. These books come out and they sell for cover price, and then eventually they end up, some of them selling for hundreds of dollars or more, because of whatever factor, because they're a variant, or because they turn out to be a key, or there's a huge demand for it or something. And so or it has a signature on it, a special signature. So along the way, people are making money at this, and so I guess the question is, where, it's really part of I think a larger conversation of what do people perceive as being fair in the market?
Hmm.
Is it fair for the publisher to take 200 books and sell them? So, well, it's their book. It's kind of like a band that sells all their tickets through Ticketmaster, and then for base price, and then all these scalpers run out and they're selling them for 10x. The band's not making that money, and then, of course, they've taken steps now to curb that, to where they've tried to corral that in, and so so I mean, if the publisher, if the guy that's creating the comic book is making a little extra money on the side from utilizing this method, is it manufactured? Yeah, but so are variants in general. I mean, 1 out of 50. I mean, that's manufactured scarcity there. So, but it's an interesting conversation. Definitely, it's getting me thinking about it. But it's definitely a factor. It's part of all these things that have really evolved and changed in comics.
Yeah.
The last few years, with the explosion of the creators getting more involved, and the aftermarket, and all the new collectors coming to space and certification, all that stuff. So it's definitely a landscape that continues to change.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before I totally let you go, because I know that I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this. Everyone in the comments would be upset about it, but I know that we spoke about some of the kind of the fallout with the lawsuits and reholder stuff, and I was just curious if there was sort of any updates that you could share with us. I mean, I already sort of know the answer that there isn't, but maybe you can just kind of share, I guess where you guys are now with it, if there's anything going on with it, and yeah, I noticed I had to actually reholder a book at C2E2 because I dropped the slab and it cracked and I had to reholder it, and I very much noticed the prompt that said, by the way, your grade might get lower as a result of this. We have to regrade. So I don't know if there's anything you can sort of talk about, as far as like the lawsuits, or where you guys are at with it, or getting people paid and all that whole thing.
Yeah, not much to report. We're in the process of compensation for the collectors that were affected with the books that were tampered with. So we're definitely dealing with that right now. And then we made immediate improvements right when this broke, when we realized what had happened. We went in and reassessed everything. We reassessed the holders, the process of encapsulation, even the process of submissions and MEs and reholders and all that stuff. So everything was reassessed immediately. Improvements were made in all those areas to make sure that this would not happen again. And then going forward, obviously, any improvements to the holder with security or design, we'll make those available to the public as soon as we can. So other than that, really not much to report on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time with me today and having this conversation. Congratulations on the launch of JSA. It'll be interesting to see what happens on the secondary market. One of the things that I'm excited about is to compare value differences of JSA and witness signatures. If there is some stuff that surfaces, it'll be fun to kind of watch that and see how the market reacts to it. But I wanted to say, again, thank you so much for hopping on the channel. Where can people, stay in tune with what you have going on, whether it be yourself or CGC as a company? Maybe you can sort of let the people know, how they can stay in tune with CGC.
I probably should, if I was smart, I would have my own Instagram page active and posting things on a regular basis, but I don't. Or maybe it's smart that I don't. I don't know. But yeah, people can obviously, CGC website, cgccomics.com. That's where we have a lot of our all of our announcements come out. And then, of course, social media, following us on Instagram, Facebook. We put a lot of content on that out every week, almost every day, and then newsletters, getting on our email list. Because we have emails that go out, and sometimes those have information on them that don't necessarily, make it. Well, actually, they're on the website, I think, but it's real time, so it's really important. That kind of goes in your face, so you definitely want to get that on that email. And then, obviously, just going to the shows and talking to us there. If you come to a show and we're set up, if I'm there, grab me if you want to talk about anything. That's what I'm there for. So, lots of ways that ask CGC. It's another good one. If you have any questions or concerns, we always have our customer service you can reach out to, and the message boards. It's always a great place to see what conversation is going on with the community, and obviously you guys are doing tons of videos that dive into all kind of different topics. So that's another great way to keep up on the latest and greatest going on in the hobby and with CGC. So yeah, lots of different ways to stay in touch with what's going on with us.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Matt. I will certainly be there to, report on all things that you guys got going on in the future. Appreciate you taking the time with us today, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Absolutely, Mickey. Thanks for having me on, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and we'll definitely have to do this again.